Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for helping us out here with the Third District Veterans History Project. I'm actually here in my office in DC. Shalisa's back in our district office in Rockland, but this is my DC office. It's in the Longworth building, right across from the Capitol, and I'm flying home tomorrow. We've had a pretty intensive stretch here where I've been back and forth every week for the last 8 weeks, but I get to be home for 2 weeks starting tomorrow. So very much looking forward to that. And I'm really excited about this project. I was in the state legislature for 6 years before starting in Congress this year. And so I've had the chance to really get to know many of the veterans in our community. I've been attending many different Memorial Day, Veterans Day events every year, and a number of other veterans functions throughout the year. I've had a veterans advisory group when I was in the legislature, so I've been really fortunate to get to know a lot of our veterans and hear their stories. And I think that, part of what makes our area such a great place to live and to work and to retire is the amazing community of veterans that we have. And I've heard many stories, and it's really one of the best parts of my job. And so, when I heard about this as an opportunity to really, memorialize and record the different experiences of people who have, of our veterans who have fought in all of the recent conflicts, and who have served in other capacities. I thought it was just really a great opportunity, so that the ways that I've been able to benefit as someone who gets to talk to veterans all the time is something that could really be preserved, and the future generations could then have for the purpose of education and to be more directly in touch, in a sense, with the past and to understand our history. I mean, I remember, a couple years ago when I had the chance to honor a World War II veteran on the floor of the State Assembly, and I remember at the time, the number of World War II veterans that we still have with us is not that high at this point, it's kind of struck me that we're at some point going to really lose that direct link with this such an important part of the whole history of the world. And so obviously, a recording and the various things that we're doing with this project at least provides a way for these voices to sort of carry forward, and that link to continue indefinitely into the future. So I think that our area, our district, our communities really have a lot to contribute in this respect. And this sort of project isn't possible without folks who are willing to step up and to meet with our veterans and to hear their stories and to compile them and to make this whole thing come together. So I just want to say thank you very much again for your help. Truly appreciate it. Look forward to meeting everyone when I'm back home. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Shalisa.
Great, absolutely. And thank you so much for being here. Well, next up, we'll go ahead. We do have a representative here from the Library of Congress who will actually host our training today and kind of go over the tips and tricks of the trade with you all. But I do want to mention, it looks like someone has their hand raised. Does anyone have a question? Okay, great. I think that everybody is all set. Well, then in that case, I will go ahead and introduce the representative. Oh, I saw another hand raised. Are there any questions? Well, if you do have a question, you can always submit your question in the chat box. If you're having difficulties, connecting with us here or having us hear you. Or you can always pop in later on and ask some questions. So then at this time, I would like to invite the representative from the Library of Congress who will be conducting our training and workshop today. His name is Owen Rogers. Owen is a public historian and liaison specialist at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. His work with the Veterans History Project builds library connectors through community oral history project activities, programs, and inclusive training materials. Rogers is also Vice President of Oral History in the Mid-Atlantic Region organization and serves on both the National Council for Public History's Government Historians Committee and the New Jersey Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation Museums Committee. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and welcome Mr. Owen Rogers. Okay, and it looks like I need to make him a presenter. Give me a moment. Let me see if I know how to do that. Okay. All right. Oh, and
Okay.
you should be all set.
I have the power. All right.
Of
Thank you so much.
course.
Thank you very much, Congressman, for your passion for veterans and for collecting all of these wonderful showing up after work to do some learning constituents for an oral history workshop. I really do appreciate being here with y'all. And it is my passion to speak to community members about ways to preserve their history locally and also to find a way for those histories to echo nationally through participation with a larger archive. So Shalisa, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I am going to transcend into the world of PowerPoint, show you some tips, tools of the trade, best practices, share some anecdotes, everything that I wish I knew 15 years ago when I started collecting veterans' oral histories, and then hold some space for your questions, your anecdotes and experience, and what you'd like to accomplish through this congressional and Library of Congress collaboration. Library of Congress Veterans History Project, we are about to turn 23. This is an archive of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress that was established through congressional action. There is, they say that there's what? I think there's a writer, the name eludes me now, but who says that there's two kinds of stories. One in which there is a mystery, and another, there is a quest, and the other where a stranger comes to town. And Veterans History Project has both of those elements. The archive is designed to collect, preserve, and make accessible the firsthand stories and personal materials of veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces who served in World War I through recent conflicts, at any point in between, and in any capacity. So I bring this stranger comes to town story because way back in 2000, as the representative mentioned, World War II veterans are very scarce today. They're treasures, their stories are meaningful. And in 2000 was when our nation, had this zeitgeist moment, Saving Private Ryan had come out in the theaters. World War II had just had its 50th anniversary. So World War II is very much on our minds and our collective consciousness. And World War II veterans at that point were passing away at a rate of about 1,000 a day. So Representative Ron Kind from Wisconsin, it is Father's Day weekend. He is flipping burgers in his backyard, and over his shoulder, he hears his father and his uncle sharing stories from the Second World War that he had never heard before. He'd asked some of the questions, had gotten answers that, indicated that there was more to the story, but it was either too painful or too difficult to communicate, that at that point in their lives, at that point in his youth, his father had held onto those stories. So the stories are coming out. He turns the gas off on the grill, runs inside, grabs the family video camera, records their stories, brings the idea to Congress, and 4 months later, Congress legislates an oral history project focused on collecting U.S. veteran stories. So any oral history project has a few different working pieces, and it is a delicate balance. So the Veterans History Project, like I would love to take a poll, and well, we can break this down a little bit afterwards. But between collecting, curating, preserving, or making accessible an oral history recording, like which is most important for history? And like for the sake of time, and because I don't want to torture you too much, it is a trick question. The answer is E. It is all of the above. And, like we go down this rabbit hole in the public history commons all the time, where very much like that, like that expression, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Similarly, like if an oral history is unrecorded, or if oral history is never archived, can it affect change? And I think the answer is like kind of sort of maybe, like if between those two people sharing that story, having that intergenerational connection, absolutely. But for change to happen, for awareness of what our veterans have experienced and sacrificed to be communicated on a national or even a global level through the 3.5 billion internet users, we need to make sure that those stories are going in a place where they can be heard. So with that in mind, we collect a variety of different veterans materials. Right over here, you probably see my mouse pointer. I hadn't seen one of these until I started working at the Library of Congress, but this is a Betacam tape over here. There's a DVD-ROM. That is probably our second most popular, our second most common kind of material that arrives that is donated to the Library of Congress. I should mention we get about 100 to 300 veteran stories every month. Before 2020, we were getting about 300 to 500 every month, so about 125 a week, and we're building back up to there. And what we see most common are oral histories. It is the Veterans Oral History Project Act. That's our bread and butter, but we also do collect period materials like original photographs, original veterans correspondence, letters, V-mail, telegrams, what have you. We love to see transcripts. And we also do have an incredible collection of veterans flat art. So anything from a doodle on the back of a GI issue air sickness bag to a veteran's watercolor painting. We hold these as primary source material expressions of veterans service. So we do follow a 30-20-10 rule, and this helps us define like what we feel is a sufficient amount of material for a researcher or a family member or a comrade or any interested person to get a clear understanding of what the veteran's experience and role within the military was. So with the 30-20-10 rule, we ask for any one of these 3 categories to be satisfied. And then from there, we will accept any additional number of materials from any of these other categories. So for example, at least 30 minutes of oral history recording, or at least 20 pages of memoir or journal entry, or at least 10 original photos, letters, or pieces of flat art, and any number of additional items will get you into the Library of Congress. So for example, a 45-minute oral history, 1 letter, and 2 photographs, that is a complete collection. A 31-minute oral history recording is a complete collection. And for veterans who have passed away, for family members who are holding on to letter collections or photograph albums and want their veteran family members' story preserved at the Library of Congress. A donation of letters or photographs or artwork with the accompanying archival forms that tell us a little bit about what that veteran experienced, where they went, where they served, when they served, would help us tell their story to future generations. So we do this all. So the big question, I remember when, well, I don't remember when, but when Congress established the Veterans History Project and set the scope of World War I, II, at that point it was Persian Gulf War veterans. Everybody sat down and they thought, how are we going to start this national oral history project that exclusively collects from amateur interviewers, some of whom have never recorded an oral history before, who are recording a set of experiences that could be anywhere from 1914 to 1999. How are we going to streamline this, make a universal system for collecting and describing these stories? They did it with what we call affectionately the field kit. And we'll get into a few more of the more specific forms later on, but this, I will share the link afterward, or I will drop the link into the chat during the Q&A. We have a PDF. We have a government created form fillable on your computer PDF, which took us a while to get there, and I'm very proud of it. That aids in the collection of oral history recordings and original materials. So I will back this up just a little bit. And this training that I'm sharing with y'all is, and this archive as a whole, one of the things that's, it's funny, public historians, you know, they say that, you know, on graduation day, like that's the day that, you know, we're banished from the institution and we go out into the community and we share our, you know, like our sheepskin historian knowledge, and, you know, like we collect history at a grassroots, at a local level. And I went from the university to the Library of Congress. I am still very much institutionalized, but my passion is this work for an oral history project that exclusively collects from amateur interviewers. And we call it shared historical authority. And the idea is that anyone can interview anyone else about their experiences, and it is just as important as, you know, a PhD historian, a subject matter expert, sitting down and doing that same recording. Like that intergenerational, that intertransfer of information is an absolute value. Everyone is important and everyone can do it. And this equipment you're seeing in front of you is very much even how the Library of Congress does it when we are traveling outside of the library. So we do ask that volunteer interviewers use personal equipment. And I will just clarify something. I think that there's somewhat of a misnomer where we had asked people to use the best equipment available to them. And there are people who read that as, okay, like if I have to choose between a cassette tape recorder and my smartphone, I will choose the smartphone. And then there are people who read that and said, well, there's this 8K camera that I really have been eyeing, and this is my opportunity to go get it. We're not asking you to buy anything new. And in my mind and in my professional experience, that superlative best means what are you the most comfortable with? And we'll talk a little bit about how to record oral histories, you know, on tablets, on phones, because the Library of Congress, we do a lot of that. And the technology that we have in our hands now can spit out a very high quality video or audio file that is safe and stable and ideal for a digital preservation environment. What I will ask you is to and we'll go through this, is to practice with the equipment before the recording. This little photo down here this is very much from a real Veterans History Project collection. If you listen to this recording, I love it. It is a younger sister interviewing her older brother right after he's finished a tour of duty in the Afghan war. Like, he's home. They're talking about how much it meant to be able to like hear each other's voice while he was deployed, how good it felt to get letters going both ways, that kinship they have, that reunion they have. And I will say that this is a great interview with two caveats. One, tilt lock was engaged on the interviewer's phone, so the whole thing's interviewed sideways. And the second is, just because we have the technology to record an oral history outside of a busy coffee shop doesn't necessarily mean that we should. That's all I will say. Besides that, is a wonderful collection. So we also collect manuscripts and photographs. I particularly like this photo. It's from the Bob Barner collection, and this is a pile of all of the mail that he wrote home to his wife during his tour of duty in the Vietnam War. We have some of it. We have his diary. We have his oral history. And we do ask for original materials. And this can be somewhat of a sticking point. And I understand it. Like, it is, especially for family members who have passed on, like, it is difficult to give up like that physical connection to them. And there's a couple reasons why we ask for original materials. One is, because of provenance. Like, it is the original item. It is the most historic item. It is the most sought by researchers. And the other, which I more personally subscribe to, because, it's 9:30 p.m. over here, and what am I about to say? Like, I feel like my lips are a little looser. In my personal opinion, I think that having originals at the Library of Congress, which is a world-class preservation facility with temperature and humidity controlled environments, fire suppression, it takes all of the anxiety off of holding on to materials that could be damaged by who knows what. We have a few family anecdotes from family members who, have donated World War I diaries, from like coastal Texas, and have written us, years later, and have said, I am so grateful that I took the weighty decision to donate this to the Library of Congress, because 2 months ago, my basement was underwater. Like, I would have lost this forever. I would say in my personal experience that, I lost my maternal grandfather recently. He was a World War II veteran. When during his celebration of life, like, I was, I guess I'm the de facto family historian. And I said, hey, mom and dad, like, let me create a tribute video. Like, I had recorded his oral history and archived it at the Veterans History Project. And I was like, I'll make a video. I'll make a slideshow of his World War II photographs. This will be great. This will be cathartic. I'm on it. In the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm a good historian. Like, I know where this is saved. This is going to be in my Google Drive. It's going to be on my laptop. It's going to be saved on my phone. It was in none of those places. But I went on the Library of Congress website. I looked at my grandpa's name, and I downloaded his oral history and his photographs. And it was so reassuring to know that, like, they are up there, they are safe on deck 7, but I can quite literally hear his voice anytime I want to, because it's been archived like in a national collecting institution. So my 2 cents is archiving something, you never really lose it. You just that it's being taken care of. So sending materials to the Library of Congress. Speaking of taking care of things.
Oh, and I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm not seeing the slides. I'm not sure if other people are, but I only see the main page in the first slide, just to let you know.
The main page in the first slide. Oh,
yeah. Like before you started the slide slideshow. I don't see you starting the slideshow, just to let you know.
Oh, that is really helpful. So you know what I've been doing? Let's see here. Let me try to share it again. And if you could just let me know, what do you see right now?
Okay, I do see the sending materials to the Library of Congress. It doesn't look like the slideshow is a full page. I can see the other slides on the side.
Oh, that's so interesting. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to share my whole screen.
Sure.
Take that option and then see if that fixes it.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me know. I'm
Sure.
going to. Okay, and what does it look like now? Be able to see me advance?
I believe so. I think we can see it now. I see Y Originals and it's a full screen. And it
Cool.
did just switch. So I think it's
Cool.
working now.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
Thank
let me
you
see
so
if
much.
you missed anything. Okay, so I will just go back to this slide. Thank you for letting me know. This
Sure.
is our sideways friend. And this is my old smartphone. But this is a real recording setup that I have used, on behalf of the Library of Congress. This is an example. This is a picture of mail from Bob Barner's collection that I'd mentioned. This is a World War II photograph album. And for sending materials to the Library of Congress, this is what it looks like. When we get materials, we have a field kit. We have some original photos. We usually have a flash drive or a DVD or CD-ROM with a digital file on it for an audio or video recording. It is vitally important that if you all participate, you send materials to us through a private courier like UPS or FedEx, as opposed to the US Postal Service. This is no slight to my fellow feds. I love the USPS. And they just have a very particular security screening process for Capitol Hill mail that involves warming incoming mail to neutralize any potential germ threat to Capitol Hill offices. So that heating process will actually destroy original materials. And the Library of Congress has a special contract with UPS and FedEx and other private carriers that includes a hand searching fee. So the library pays extra to make sure that materials you send to us stay safe. This is what Deck 7 looks like. And it's about 45 degrees in here. My colleague is wearing long sleeves very intentionally. And this is humidity and temperature controlled so that paper documents and particularly magnetic tape media will stay preserved for as long as it can. Honestly, the photographs and the letters are looking great. It's that tape media that ages very poorly. And I'm proud to say that we have gone back through our entire catalog of audio cassettes and VHS tapes and beta cams and high 8s and digitized everything just so that, those voices and those images stay stable. So what happens next? Once it gets here, it doesn't just sit in these boxes. We curate digital projects. We have online exhibits. We have collaborations with the Geography and Map Division to cartographically chart out veteran stories. And every single collection that is archived by the Veterans History Project is available through our online database on the Library of Congress website. We have about 116,000 collections so far. About 70,000 of those have some digitized material. And now we're going to get into, we've got about, 15 minutes. And remind me, just so that you don't see me looking through my email. I just want to make sure, are we going to start the Q&A at 9:45 or at 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock,
You know
right?
what? Yeah, that's kind of up to you. 9:45 or 10 is fine.
Cool. Oh, my bad. So 6:45 or 7. And yeah, so that's good. 10 o'clock would, or 7 o'clock would be great, because let's get into the oral history. Let's talk about yeah, how the sausage is made. So there's 3 phases to any oral history recording. It's before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. And the before the interview, they are all equally important. Before the interview, it is so important that you communicate the project scope and time requirements to the narrator of the story. And I'll be using the term narrator to describe the person giving the story on the recording. An interviewee and a narrator, they're kind of like different things. Like interviewees, that would be something like you'd be asking somebody about like a very specific process, like describe what the bank robber was wearing, as opposed to tell me about your life, your parents, how you grew up, why you chose to serve in the U.S. military. They are narrating their life story for you. So I will be using that term throughout the training. So the scope and time requirements, like I said, these recordings are at least a half an hour. Most of them are about an hour and a half. So letting your narrator know that it's going to take about 2.5 hours to fill out the forms and sit down and do the interview recording. Just nice and respectful. The scope is huge, and I think also explaining this intergenerationally is huge. That all Veterans History Project recordings and materials will be databased and will be put online. So there are those moments where I've had narrators come out of the studio and I've asked hey, it sounds to me like you've never shared that story before. Like, have you ever talked about this with your family? They'll say oh no, I could never tell my family these things. And it is my duty to remind them that this is going to be databased, and if they want to hear this story, they can hear this story. It is so important that narrators understand that and agree to that. This is the time before the interview where you develop interview questions. Now, the Veterans History Project, we have sample interview questions, but as opposed to reading through those like a survey, this before the interview, the best volunteer interviewers I know get a cup of coffee with their narrator, or have make a personal phone call, and just get to know them, get to know basically the rough outline of their life story, what branch they served in, about what years they served, and that helps guide their interview questions. It also really helps to ask them is there a particular story you want to make sure that you include in this recording, so that you can prompt them for that during the interview. So familiarize yourself with interview equipment, just like our sideways recording a few slides ago. This is the time to practice with your recorder. Make sure you know how the tripod works. Make sure that everything does still work, and that's all charged up and ready to go on your day. I have had, this is. I'll talk about that in a couple slides later. But I have been there. I have had to redo recordings. This is before my Library of Congress days. I've had to redo my recordings because I think the biggest reason is I tried to do everything myself instead of bringing a videographer with me. And the second is that I had a battery die in a microphone, and yeah, somebody forgot to check the ohms on the microphone before they left, or put in a new battery. That was me. So 3 phases of oral history recording. We're going to talk about during the interview, and I am going to talk about things I like that are happening in this photo and things that could be better. So this is, I would say, first of all, the interviewer is doing a great job. Her body language is pretty much open. You know, we've got the narrator, his legs are crossed, he's a little closed off, but like you want to be open, be affirming. You know, she's leaning in, she's interested, she's clearly listening and engaged with his story. What I also love is that for videography, the shades are drawn. There's overhead, constant fluorescent lighting. He is front lit instead of backlit, so he doesn't have that, you know, unsolved mysteries vibe about him. He also has a lavalier microphone on him so that the camera can clearly hear his answers. They're sitting pretty close to each other. You know, like they are warming to each other. There is rapport there. We can see it. And he also has quick access, to water and tissues if he needs them. Our interviewer also has an extra tape. And what I would like to see changed about this recording is I would love it if she, just like Owen Rogers when he was just an overachieving graduate student, I would love it if she brought a videographer with her, somebody to help her share the mental load of recording an oral history. So somebody whose job is to entirely focus on the camera and the recording and make sure it looks and sounds good and that the camera is not going to run out of battery or run out of tape, so that the interviewer can focus on good follow-up questions and stay engaged. Always recommend that you go out in pairs. Would love to see a power cord to the camera so you're not stuck on the battery. And would also love to see a second microphone on the interviewer. It's important to hear the interview questions as well as the answers. Besides that, this is a superb setup. It's so important that veterans feel comfortable. You know, I've done a lot of interviews at veterans' homes, and you know, I ask them like, what's your favorite chair? Where's your favorite place in the house? And you know, it's important that the narrator feels comfortable. Water and tissues are also important. And if you notice, if I go back here, this camera can see the narrator from roughly the chest up. So when the hands are at their waist, they're off screen. Part of this comfort is before the recording starts, I think particularly when recording oral histories of narrators who have experienced, you know, some trauma in their lives, you know, be it veterans, be it first responders, be it disaster and emergency workers. All of these oral history projects have generated best practices, and those best practices point to giving the narrator an out if or when they need an out. And that out can just look like waving your hand, you know, at waist level, so that the videographer and the interviewer know that you want to pause the camera, and then they get to decide what happens next. What happens next can be, you know, like they take a walk to the restroom, they take a sip of water, they call a friend, or, you know, they just take a moment to find their breath and think about what they want to say and if they want to continue with the recording. I just had a couple congressional fellows up in the recording studio with me the other day doing a hands-on training, and follow-up questions was something that came up where it was their first time doing an interview, and they felt like they were so bound to asking all of the sample interview questions that they missed the opportunities to ask follow-up questions. And the follow-up questions really are the heart of the story. And so if there's, you know, if a narrator starts talking about this, you know, amazing life experience that you didn't anticipate, and your questions like don't have any kind of inkling or like any kind of question connected to it, like please chase it, follow it. Like there's history there. And then, of course, like going back to Veterans History Project standards, recording at least 30 minutes of audio or video is wonderful. I think I recommend if the interview, there's no maximum amount of time. We just got a recording from Congressional Office that was 8 hours long, recorded in about 5 or 6 sections. And I am so happy they followed best practices. And I usually cap out about 2 hours maximum for an interview before everybody takes a break. Then you just start getting overworked. And like the oral history starts to suffer a little bit. And also I think like particularly for older narrators, like your 102, 103-year-old World War II veterans who are contributing oral histories, you know, I like to give them a chance to rest up, or at least give them the option with 2-hour sessions. So setting the scene, a little bit of videography is important. When I first learned camera work, everybody was obsessed with the rule of thirds. And you can kind of see here that because of the columns behind the narrator, you know, like this is, you know, third number 1, third number 2, third number 3, you know, those classic, like, you know, like late at night documentaries, you know, like you know, I first really started getting into documentary film in the 90s, and the 90s loved the rule of thirds. So we'd always have the talking head on the far left or the far right, you know, angled, talking to the camera. We'd see a lot of hands, and current videography points to the diamond. So situating a narrator in the middle of the frame, a little bit of depth of field behind them, and some interesting objects that would help make that diamond symmetrical. It's really pleasing to the eye. You know, like if we had a potted plant over here and a framed photo right here, mwah, would love it. Recording equipment, showed this the other day, just a few slides ago. And what we have here is a flexible tripod. You know, this can just sit on a desk, on a table. We have a splitter going into the headphone jack for a microphone for the interviewee and the interviewer. That is not recommended. I mean, sorry, that is not required, you know, to have the external microphones. But it can definitely help save you in a noisy space. If you don't have them or have access to them, you can mitigate the need for them by choosing a quiet location. And, you know, like I always feel like the Orkin guy when I go into a narrator's home, because, you know, like I'm looking around, you know, I'm not looking for bugs, but I'm looking for ambient noise. And so we went and, you know, one time I went and did a recording, and the veteran, you know, I asked him like, hey, like, where's your favorite place? Where would you feel most comfortable? And he's like, hey, like, let's do it in the kitchen. And you know, I had to weigh options because we got in the kitchen, and you know, there are all of these hard metal 90-degree surfaces that reflected all of the sound in the room, and there was an echo everywhere. And I didn't have external microphones. And I had to ask him, I'm like, do you have a second favorite place in your home that is a little bit quieter? So that refrigerator compressor, those hard metal surfaces, we ended up going down to the basement where there were a lot of really cushy, comfortable couches and carpet, and everything sounded great. So environment is a big factor in considering where you want to do your recording. If there's a part of the house, or if I feel like public libraries typically have like quiet rooms for reading or researchers. And in my experience, public libraries have been very cool and very on board with community oral history projects. If you call them up and ask like, hey, like I'm recording a veterans oral history for the member's office and the Library of Congress, do you have a quiet space where I can record this? In my experience, they've always been accommodating. For recording equipment, these 3 things will save your recording. One is making sure to, you know, put your phone on private, put it on airplane mode, You know, Owen is giving you permission to tell your boss, or Owen is giving you permission to say, hey boss, the Library of Congress told me to put my phone on airplane mode for the next 2 hours, because while incoming calls will not erase audio or video recordings, what they will do is they will stop them. And what I have observed or heard from feedback in the field is, you know, people being in situations where, you know, a veteran is in the middle of a story, mom calls, their buddy calls, their boyfriend or girlfriend call, and all of a sudden, like, the phone starts ringing on the tripod, and everybody gets embarrassed, everybody laughs a little bit, and in the anxiety that follows, they just want to get right back into the recording, and they forget to turn the camera back on again. So airplane mode will save you. Going into, if you're going to be recording audio instead of video, going into the audio settings on your phone or your tablet and selecting lossless will give you a much richer audio file. It'll be a waveform audio file instead of an MPEG-3 or an MPEG-4 audio file. Those peaks and valleys look a lot nicer. I don't know if we have any audio files here, or maybe even anybody who's been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and has seen the peaks and valleys, the difference between you know, an MP3 and a cassette or a record, but you know, there's a difference there. There's a lot more data in a lossless file. And then there's at least 720p for video. So that sort of high definition / standard definition band. And a lot of that depends on like how much extra space you have on your phone. In the field kit, we have a description of how much space a recording will take up at 720p versus 1080 versus 4K. And, you know, I did a few 4K recordings on an iPad recently, and those hour-long, hour and 20-minute recordings are about 20 gigabytes. So if you have the space, the Library of Congress will absolutely take them. One of those other caveats there is that the Library of Congress does want everything to arrive on a physical carrier. So like a flash drive or a CD or a DVD. And so getting those 20 gigabyte files to the Library of Congress is a challenge. I was talking to one of the digital asset specialists in the American Folklife Center, and they collect a lot of content digitally from folklorists out in the field and even on dedicated systems. Those 4K files that are gigantic are very difficult to send through a network connection. So I personally feel like 1080 is the sweet spot. So recording veterans' oral history outdoors, again, we're talking about like, you know, like act like the Orkin guy and get the vibe of the surroundings. This is a photo from a real recording that we did out at the National Gathering of American Indian Veterans. It was out in a field near, I think in Schaumburg, Illinois. And it looks serene, it looks quiet, but that whole field was full of busy, buzzing insects. And this recording needed lavalier microphones. If you're going to be doing outdoor recordings, again, like, you know, we have had recordings from veterans who, you know, you ask them like, where's your favorite place, and it's their Zen garden. And what you want to make sure, if you're going to be doing a recording outside, you can absolutely do it, but my recommendations are bring an extension cord so you make sure you have power. Check the weather report before you commit, and have a second location, like literally like a rain date or a rain location in case the weather gets bad. And the lavalier microphones, just because it's going to be a little noisier outside. The Library of Congress, since 2020, we have accepted veterans' oral histories that were recorded remotely. So if the veteran in your life, you know, lives in Anchorage, Alaska, and you live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, you can absolutely hop on a video. I start to giggle. because you can hop on a video call and record it to the cloud, put it on a flash drive or a disk, send it to the Library of Congress. We'll treat it just like it came out of a camera, because in a sense it did. There's a great Marine Corps veteran who just submitted a collection, and his Zoom avatar was the Count from Sesame Street. And so we have about 90 minutes of a Marine Corps veteran talking about their experiences in the service. And it is the Count, recalling the history. So also something to consider before you hit record. Another thing to consider before you hit record is how it's going to look. And we recommend adding about 10 or 15 minutes of extra time to any remotely recorded interview. And that is time where, where the narrator walks around their house with their phone or their tablet or their computer and says, how do I look now? How do I look now? How do I look now? In this situation right up here, this was a sound issue. Again, this veteran was sitting in a kitchen full of flat, hard metal surfaces, and it was really echoey. So they went in their living room, they sat on the couch, they had a nice matte backdrop, nice matte shirt, and it looked and sounded great. And this interview down here, yeah, these are both real interviews. These aren't just, pictures of Owen's friends that, they kindly added to this presentation. And in this veteran's oral history, okay, we got this diamond here, we got all this stuff a little bit outside of the diamond, but it looks pretty good. Her blinds were open, and so it was difficult to see her because she was backlit. So she closed the blinds, and the interview was great. The last part of the oral history recording is after the interview, and this is where you make sure you have all the archival forms, you thank the narrator for their time, their service, you make 2 copies of the recording, one for your records, one for the veteran, and I actually recommend a third, because the library wants one. Keep one for your records, give one to the veteran, and these are the forms that I mentioned before. I will drop the link for the PDF of this into the chat afterwards, and this is basically, like I said, a do-it-yourself catalog entry, a baseball card of stats for where and how long and when a veteran served in the armed forces. A veteran's release form, the plain language translation is that the narrator owns the copyright to the recording. The Library of Congress has the permission to store the physical copy on site, make it accessible to researchers, and allow its staff to use it for any derivative works. Derivative works means that, you get a web page on the library website. Owen can show a picture of you during a oral history training workshop, and your materials can be shared, both in special curated collections displays and also at the request of researchers. Interviewer signs a similar form. Donors and volunteer interviewers describe, when I say donor, I don't mean people who give us money, I mean people who send us collection material. Describe what the interview was about and about how long it was, when it was recorded, and where it was recorded. A photograph log helps develop a caption for an image. A manuscript data sheet describes how big of a manuscript collection is being donated. And then I want to make sure that we have about 20 minutes for questions, because fitting an oral history training into 45 minutes, it's something that can be done. Like if I was huddled around with y'all, I would love to do some practice and sit and just go through some modules with y'all, and maybe we can do that later, like at a later date. but I am so grateful for your time and so curious to hear about what you all want to accomplish and what questions you might have about oral history or interviewing veterans.
Yes, so please feel free to unmute yourself or drop questions in the chat box, and Owen would be happy to help answer any questions you may have.
And I'm just curious.
Is this presentation available through a webinar or something? Hello?
Oh, Owen, I think you might be muted.
Uh-oh, did I get
Say that
muted?
again.
There, you're back.
Oh, okay. What I can do is I can send you these slides. It is not networked at the moment.
It's not what?
It's not online at the moment.
So the answer, yes, it's going to be online.
This is, so Shalisa, you are recording this, right?
Yeah, I can kind of jump in here. I am recording this training, so I will send out the recording to everybody along with the slides that Owen provides, and any links and that kind of thing. So I will also mention that, our office is going to partner with you guys as volunteers. So we'll have a staff member in interviews with you. We'll also provide all of the forms that you need. So hopefully we can help with a lot of that and make it pretty easy on your end, so you really can just engage and connect with the questions themselves and with the narrator.
So how long do we anticipate that will occur?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? How long the event will occur?
I says, how long can we anticipate before we can access this recording?
I am hoping to be able to send this to you guys tomorrow. I think that as soon as we're done here, I'll have the recording available. So hopefully very soon.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for being here. Any other questions? I think we do have a hand raised from 916-293-1813. Candace, is that you? Okay, maybe not. Well, if no one has any other questions, I think we can close up this workshop and webinar here. And of course, if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me or give our office a call. Our office phone number here is 916-724-2575. Again, that's 916-724-2575. I will go ahead and type my email address right here in the chat box if you guys would like to email me. I believe that I have been emailing everybody here, hopefully. And then we will be in touch with you guys. If I don't have your email address, if you didn't receive an email from me, please call our office that we can be sure to get your contact information so that we can be in touch with you and start connecting you with veterans and scheduling some times to collect these histories. Otherwise, with that, I have just sent my email in the chat box. If there are no further questions, I think we'll go ahead and close up. Thank you everyone for participating, and thank you very much, Owen, for the training today. It was very useful and helpful information.
Great. Well, thank you all for taking the time to be here with us. It really means a lot to sit around and talk oral history, and I can't wait to hear the stories that you collect.
Thanks, Owen. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.